I don't know how they pitched this adaptation. A coming of age, cross country road trip YA love story centering around cannibals. But somehow it works. Bones and All is one of the best films of the year. Well acted, well developed love story. Here's my review of Bones and All. Taylor Russell brilliantly plays Marin, this 18-year-old unsuspecting cannibal who has no idea that she is cursed until one day she is invited to a sleepover and instinctively gnaws off the finger of the hostess of this sleepover. Then she runs home, blood dripping from her fangs, really. Blood dripping from her mouth. She runs home, and her father realizes that she can't resist, that he can't protect her anymore. They abruptly leave their shack and head to Maryland. They were living in Virginia, head to Maryland, and then the next morning he abandons her with a little money and her birth certificate and this recording chronicling how she came to be a cannibal and how he can no longer protect her. So she takes that money, the birth certificate, she buys a Greyhound bus ticket cross country in hopes that she will find clues about her mother. She believes that her mother is no longer living, but she wants to piece together who she is by finding out who her mother was. And so she travels cross country trying to find her mother's mother so that she can understand why she's like this. On the way, she is found by Mark Rylance's character. He plays Sully. And when I tell you, Mark Rylance delivers an Oscar-worthy performance. His performance is so unsettling. Every moment he's on screen, he steals the scene. He delivered a pulsating, like nail biter of a performance. I was so terrified for Marin because so he meets her. He's an eater, and he has a gift to smell other eaters and is magnetized to them. So he from maybe a couple miles away, he smells Marin. Now Marin at this point only knows that she's gnawed at that finger. She doesn't remember her cannibalism as an infant, as a baby, and she has no recollection of her mother. And so he snuffs her out and he takes her to this house. And, this is a young 18-year-old girl, first time in the world alone. And so he's like, I'm going to feed you. When's the last time you've eaten? And he means a human. He takes her into this house and pretty much shows her the ropes. There is a woman there, a senior woman, laying on the floor, and Mark Rylance's character, Sully, is waiting for her to die so that he can eat or feed on her. And so he and Marin feed on her, and Mark Rylance wants to keep Marin under his wing and, go out into this world feeding together. But she's terrified. This is the first time she really is aware of what she is and what she's doing. And so she gets on the bus and continues on her journey in finding out about her mother. But Sully, later on we find, has been stalking her. So Marin continues on her journey and eventually happens upon Timothee Chalamet's character, Lee. And let me tell you, Timothee Chalamet gives an Oscar-worthy performance as well. I mean, everyone in this film delivers. Everyone delivers. Timothee Chalamet, I gotta say, he has the range of Leonardo DiCaprio. This young man, this actor, is about to be one of the greatest actors that has ever lived. The way he picks his roles, I mean, he is very selective, and I just don't think he's ever picked a role that hasn't been fantastic. He is a thespian, and he is so good in this film. I think the performances outshine the actual story and outshine the film, really. He delivers such a great performance in this film. And when it comes to nominating great performances, I believe that the actors in this film should be recognized because they really deliver. So Timothée Chalamet is an eater. He's alone in this world. He had eaten his father, his abusive alcoholic father, to protect his sister. He ate his father, and so he's pretty much on the run, but he'll always go back home, not to see his mother, but to see his little sister, because he wants to protect her even from afar. So he and Marin meet, and Marin doesn't want to be alone. At this point, Marin is frightened of who she is, and so she's trying to avoid eating or feeding. She's trying to avoid it, but Lee is teaching her that she shouldn't resist who she is and what she is. And so they go about on the world, into the world, feeding when they can. Now with Lee's help, Marin gets to her grandmother's, her mother's house, and her mother's mother explains who her mother is and where her mother is. And Marin finds out that her mother was adopted, that she was abandoned at a fire station, and that they cared for her as long as they could. So Marin finds out that her mother is in an infirmary for the insane. And so she and Lee travel to go see her, and her mom is Chloe Sevigny. Chloe. Now here's the thing. I think that Chloe should be nominated for this performance for a Best Supporting Actress nomination for the Oscars. The reason why I think she probably won't be is because Marin reads this letter that her mother wrote 15 years ago because she knew that her daughter would eventually find her, or was hoping that her daughter would eventually find her in this infirmary. So rather than give Chloe these the lines, Marin reads it. I think that was a mistake because I believe that Chloe, a fantastic actress, I mean, always delivers, right? I think Chloe would have put life into those words a lot more than Marin reading the letter. So I wish she had those lines, even though she really gives this like titillating performance. I think if she just had those words, if she had that dialogue, she would probably be a front runner for an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Now, she still delivers. It is a very scary performance. She is an eater, and she has gnawed off her hands to prevent from continuing to feed, especially with the nurses in this infirmary. And she can't resist and attacks to try to eat her own daughter so that she won't be out in this world as a cannibal. It's one of the best scenes in the film, and I just wish she had the dialogue. I think it would have elevated her really micro role a lot more had she been able to say the words that were written. But it's still a great scene. She really, really delivers. Michael Stolberg also has like a micro role. He's an eater, and he's been, traveling cross country with this cop who just wants to observe Michael Stolberg's character. He wants to observe him eating. And there's so much tension in this film. There's so much tension in this like mini scene, because you're sitting there wondering who's going to eat whom. Like, are Marin and Lee going to eat? And they don't eat feeders, or they try not to eat, they don't eat eaters. They try not to. They could, but they try not to. That's like their rule. And but in this scene, it feels like they're either going to feed off Michael Stolberg's character or the cop, or Michael's going to feed off the cop, and he's been waiting for the right moment. But either way, Marin and Lee escape, and Michael Stolberg's character is, he's pissed that they are escaping. So you're led to believe that maybe he was going to eat off them, or he wanted to share this cop with them. So after this fiasco, Lee and Marin continue on their journey, and she eventually meets his family and eventually finds out that he ate his dad. But together they decide that they will try to live normal lives as long as they can. So they get jobs, they get an apartment, and they really try to avoid feeding. But then Sully has still been stalking Marin, and he is very jealous that she is living or trying to live a normal life with another eater, Lee. So he is there to really kill Lee so that he can have Marin to himself. And when he mounts her, and you're thinking, this is an old man mounting this 18-year-old who he wants to share his life with and share this flesh-eating journey with. He mounts her, but Lee has smelled him from 2 miles away, and he comes there with a plastic bag to suffocate him and kill him so that they can eat. This scene lasts maybe 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, and wow. Mark Rylance, now this is not one of those Oscar baity films, but again, if it's just about the performances, Mark Rylance, who had a fantastic year. I mean, he should even be nominated for the outfit, but I'll leave that. But he has had a phenomenal year. And if we are just talking about performances, aside from the context of the film, if we're talking about performances, he deserves an outstanding supporting actor Oscar nomination for this role. Now, there are some shortcomings with this film. In particular, the eaters, these cannibals, aren't accountable to anyone. Like, no one's chasing them for the bodies that they left behind. There are no investigations, there are no cops, and I understand that this doesn't have to be tainted with law enforcement like Bonnie and Clyde. I think this follows beats like Bonnie and Clyde, but I just think there's more substance in this one. But there is no one chasing them really, no law enforcement. So you're missing that element, and I think that's more of something we're used to, so that's why I feel like it's lacking that part of it, but it might have wasted time. Also, there are title cards of every city that they go to. I think that was unnecessary, and there are title cards for the time frame. I think that was unnecessary. We didn't need those. And I think the set design was beautiful. I think they captured the time frame very beautifully. I think Luca Guadagnino did a fantastic job with the direction. And I also think that cinematographer Arseny Khachaturian did a great job capturing. I mean, it was very picturesque, and you felt like you were in the time, in like the early 90s. It felt very reminiscent of that time. I think they capture that beautifully. What I didn't like, though, is that the camera would land on objects that didn't move the narrative. Like, you captured this pool of blood on the floor, and and they captured, the stains the blood left behind. And I love that narrative. But then the camera would like land on a chair. It would just land on these objects that I don't understand why. It just seemed like wasted moments. And shots like those are not cheap. So I don't understand why it would just land on, various random objects. But for the most part, I think it was beautifully captured. A lot of these scenes, especially as it captured the country in the early 90s. I think those shots were very beautiful. The score, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross are back at it again. The score is very beautiful. And one other thing I had a kind of an issue with, I think the chemistry between Timothee Chalamet and Taylor Russell was very believable and rich, but saying that this was a romance, I think, is a stretch, because they were really they weren't necessarily, or they didn't seem necessarily sexually attracted to each other, but felt like they needed each other to hold each other accountable in the world. I think they fed off of each other's energy rather than them having like this romantic energy to them. And maybe they did love each other, but not in that romanticized way of, your traditional attraction between girl and boy. I don't think that was there. I think they fed off of each other's energy. That said, Bones and All is such a fantastic film. It is in theaters now. Seeing it on the big screen is going to be so worth it. This is one of the best films of the year and one of the best ensemble performances of the year, period. I hope that Mark Rylance, even Taylor Russell, Timothée Chalamet, Chloe Sevigny, I hope there is room for this cast to get nominations, because they deliver. Bones and All is in theaters now.